Only what's done for Christ will last. Meditations on the death of Aaron. I once had a man tell me, who's an executive position in a large Manhattan company, one of the largest in the U.S., he would go to retirement parties of those coworkers of his who had given heart, soul, mind, and strength to a company and been faithful to serve late nights and work overtime for 30, 40 years. And at the retirement party, which would usually occur midweek on a 30 minutes of a lunch break, they would get a cake, they would get a thank you, and by the end of the day, someone else was unpacking their boxes and things in their office, and they were replaced. Work is futile. All work is futile. There's a futility in even the greatest jobs and most successful careers, and that futility even touches even some of the most significant careers that have ever been. One of those, and one of the primary ones, would be Aaron's 40-year ministry career. Not only is what Aaron accomplished significant, but for how long he accomplished it. We know him because of his staff that budded over the other 12 tribes of Israel, was preserved in the Ark of the Covenant with the 10 Commandments. We know Aaron because his was the voice that spoke to Pharaoh, calling God's people out of Israel. We know Aaron because Aaron, he was the first of those Levitical priests, those ones that gave sacrifice of atonement for the people of Israel, who ministered in the temple. He was the first. He got the ball rolling. He set the standard and created the system of atonement under the divine guidance of the Lord for all of those after him up until 70 A.D. Aaron's career and resume is recorded even in the book of Hebrews. We know from the book of Hebrews that he is compared to Christ. Christ's priestly work infinitely better than Aaron and the Levitical priest's work was, but still the fact that you could have your work compared to Christ, even if but a shadow, still speaks to the excellence of the work that you have accomplished. And so Aaron, even though his work was a copy of what was to come, even though it was a shadow, it was glorious, it was likely more significant than most any other man. He's up there with Moses and Abraham and David in terms of the success and influence of his career. Now, all of this lands quite heavy when you read in Deuteronomy the account given to the second generation of Israelites who were recounting how God had worked in Israel for that last 40 years. What's said about Aaron, especially at the end of his life, it reads like this in Deuteronomy 10:6. Aaron died, and there he was buried, and his son Eleazar ministered as priest in his place. That's it. That's all. Out of a life's work to the second generation of Israel, just a part of a verse that says he died, he was buried, and his son took his place. Now, there is another instance in Numbers that talks about him receiving a customary funeral. But the second generation of Israel didn't even hear about that funeral. All they got was his death, his burial, and his son taking his place. Take that in. That's significant. It is sobering for any man who loves his work, for any man who does not love his work, but puts his heart, soul, mind into his work, and works any career for any number of years. You are replaceable. You will be replaced. Someone will likely come and take the job that you're doing and do it better than you have done it. Even the most notable careers, even family members in the second generation struggle to remember what that man has done. By the third generation, people struggle to even remember his name. Our names and careers, perhaps, this might suggest. They're not to be remembered. Maybe we don't have work so that our legacy lives on through our work. I want to suggest that Aaron's life mattered and his work mattered because he did it for the Lord. And only what he did for the Lord truly lived on. So if a man passes on a trade or a career, these things are commendable. If you're a computer programmer and you teach your son to be a computer programmer, you served in the military and you teach your son, and he goes and serves in the military. If you're an athlete and your son takes off in athletics, there are many hobbies that men pass on to their sons. These things are commendable at some level. But is there not also some futility? And is Aaron's legacy not truly the true legacy of Aaron's work, that his son began to serve the Lord in his stead? That his passion to serve Christ is ultimately what he passed on to his son, and what the only thing that really needed to be remembered. Maybe he did. Maybe Aaron's sons did take on Aaron's hobbies, his personal interests, his likes and dislikes. We don't know. It doesn't really matter. What matters and what was preserved in Scripture is that his service to the Lord was taken on by his sons and carried on by his sons after he left. It reminds us, and I'll close with a famous saying many of you have probably heard, C.T. Studd, in a little quote that he gave. And I want to give a fuller context. C.T. Studd actually was a British missionary. 1885, entered the mission field of China with Hudson Taylor. And many have heard this quote, but they have not heard it in its entirety. And I just want to read it. It says, "Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, yes, only one. Soon will be its fleeting hours done. Then in that day, my Lord to meet and stand before his judgment seat. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, a few brief years, each with its burdens, hopes, and fears, each with its clay I must fulfill, living for self or in his will. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. When this bright world would tempt me sore, when Satan would a victory score, when self would seek to have its way, then help me, Lord, with joy to say, only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Oh, let my love with fervor burn, and from the world now let me turn, living for thee and thee alone, bringing thee pleasure on thy throne. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, yes, only one. Now let thy will be done. And when at last I'll hear the call, I'll know, I'll say, 'twas worth it all. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last.